Hello, and welcome to this episode of Powerful Conversations. So much has happened personally, professionally, and globally since our first episode in September 2023 that I cannot wait to unpack with you. But even with all these changes, one thing remains the same. Powerful Conversations is a space where we can begin answering the question, given that demographers estimate that the U.S. will become a majority minority country in 23 years, what will the seat of power look like in the future? I want to thank the Mendoza College of Business, the Alumni Association's Think ND, the Office of the Provost, the Office of Institutional Transformation, the Notre Dame Initiative on Race and Resilience, ND Research, and the Black alumni of Notre Dame for sponsoring our time together. So what does 18 months of planning and 20 years of research, dreaming, and prayer look like? Welcome to Powerful Conversations. Through Powerful Conversations with Black women leaders, we will explore a new framework of business leadership. In today's episode, we are honored to have two guests. Danielle Green, Notre Dame class of 1999, who is a U.S. Army veteran, former Indy women's basketball player, Warriors Speak Spokesperson with the Wounded Warrior Project, and a field examiner with the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. Welcome, Danielle.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning. And to round out this conversation, I'm pleased to welcome Shantel Thomas, Ph.D., PCC-S, LSW, President and CEO of A Sound Mind Counseling Service and founder of the Center for Healing the Hurt, a free trauma-based therapy center for kids and teens in the Cincinnati inner city. Welcome, Shantel.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
It's wonderful to be with you two today. I could think of no better combo, both because of your personal stories and your connections to resilience and women's athletics. To start, I want you all to share, if you feel comfortable, what would you say have been your biggest bright spots or moments of joy in the last 18 months?
Go ahead, Dr. Thomas.
Okay, cool. There's been so much that has happened in the past 18 months in my life. So I would say, I'm really passionate about people being well and healthy and whole. And so for me, I have been working with kids and teens my whole life. And the Trauma Center had received a couple of large grants here in Cincinnati, Ohio, to work with the young people. And we started what I call peer-to-peer trauma counseling. And with that, these young people learned how to look for signs of trauma in their peers. They learned how to role play and talk to them and the right questions to ask. So for me, that was one of the biggest successes that I had outside of, there's always the receiving awards in the community for the work that you do. So that's nice over the past 18 months that has happened. But my biggest, I would say just over the 18, that working with these young people and watching them go from experiencing hurt or harm to being healed and knowing what signs of healing are and how to self-regulate. So for me, it's the work that I do has been the biggest piece because I love when people say, I get it. I now understand how my mental health needs to be that, and that impacts my physical health, my spiritual health, my well-being. So how it all comes together so that the person is really whole.
Oh, I love that. And we're going to unpack several of those areas that you brought up as we continue our conversation. What about with you, Danielle?
With me, I'm a speaker with Wounded Warrior Project. It's the largest, most innovative, non-for-profit organization in the country. So I'm just, I practice gratitude. I'm, just being able to, travel the country to share my story as a combat disabled female veteran and give those veterans who feel hopeless and helpless because of the system, because of their situation, just hope and breathe new life into them. Just because their mission or purpose ended in the service does not mean they cannot transform themselves and come up with a new purpose and mission in life. And so just being able to speak, I've been on the bus now for 3 years. And so I know you said 18 months, but That's a highlight because I'm continuously improving my craft. You can continuously improve it and raise the bar. So that's one. But I think I didn't realize until last year when I was asked to speak at my 25th anniversary at Notre Dame. I was asked to speak at the Father TED Talk with 4 other speakers. And so that was a huge highlight. And I was petrified, but it was so rewarding just to be welcomed back, celebrate that. 25 years, I was able to connect with Coach Ivy, Coach McGraw. It was just nice catching up with people. And so that was a highlight. And then I think being able to travel to London with my son and a friend, and we went to Oxford University, and just for him to, my son, he's 10, to experience that. And we went to see 3 plays in 72 hours because I think he's a performing arts guy. And so to give him that experience, so he can have these worldly cultural experiences, it just brought joy to me. So I think those are the top 3 highlights for me.
I love that for you. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for your service.
You're welcome.
Now, I'm sure in these same 18 months, there have been 1 or 3 things that have thrown you for a loop. What has been grounding you in this season?
Would you like to start on this?
I could go. Thank you, doctor. It's been tough. So I'm here in St. Petersburg, Florida. And so back in October, we experienced Hurricane Milton, I think was a category 5, maybe 4 or 5. And we didn't leave. And so just to experience that was very terrifying. It was scary. It was almost, to me, biblical in portion. And so after that, when the storm passed over us, I just made a point that, I need to return back to my roots. And my roots is Illinois, Indiana. So I talked to my son and I said, we're going back to be with friends and family. And, that threw me for a loop because I really love it down here. Sunshine State is very nice. But, what keeps me centered and grounded is just staying faithful and prayed up. And when I say prayer, I'm talking about old school prayer where my son and I, we get on our knees and we send those prayers up. We try to go to church every Sunday, but sometimes we don't make it, and that's okay, because I still feel like when you're spiritual, it's in your heart and not necessarily out and about. So just believing in something that's bigger and powerful than myself, constantly sending up those prayers, practicing gratitude and humility, leaning on family and friends. My son is into Taekwondo, so the Taekwondo community, the YMCA, just community is very powerful when your family is 1,200 miles away. So that's what I leaned on.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, just what you said, family is very important to me as well. And it keeps me grounded. When I think back over the past 18 months, there's been a lot of challenges. I have a 23-year-old and a 25-year-old son. And, just with them being young adult African-American males,
Mhm.
the challenges that come with that and the things that they encounter. And being mom, you're concerned about will they, the things that could out in the community. For me, I've always been a big believer in the word of God and how it applies to not only my life, but those who are around me. So my circle of friends have always been, I've had my spiritual friends, I have my physical health friends, and then I have just my girlfriends I travel with. But the one thing that I enjoy is that when I go to speak in different cities, whether it's nationally or internationally, and they always ask me to talk about what has been the strength of my life, and then how have I overcome things. I always talk about the superpower that I have, and how we all have one, and how we, I don't give in. I don't give up. I dig in.
Mhm.
Right. So we don't give up. We dig in. We keep fighting. We keep going, and we move forward. And so for me, has always been the power of my spiritual background, and knowing that when things get high, I go down on my knees, I pray, I fast. And right now I'm actually in a fast right now because my pastor asked me to speak on the last 7 words of, Christ on Good Friday. And so I'm like, I need to be prepared for that. And so the only thing that I know is when things get tough, I don't give up, I dig in. And so over the past 18 months, I had, whether it's challenges with the children or the private practices that I own, or having, to shift when things happen with young people and how they have their challenges. And then they call you and say, can you help? And you have to respond. And in Cincinnati, there's been a big piece of young people with gun violence, and the young people, either killing or wounding each other with the gun violence. And so being called, by the mayor or someone in the city to say, can you come and speak to this? Or can you come and work with these young people, and having to shift in that moment, I think if I did not have something, or if I was not rooted and grounded in the word, it would probably shift my foundation. But I have this strong foundation, and I know there's times where I have to pull away and say, go into your own closet, be quiet. Don't do anything for anybody else. Take care of you. Self-care is the most important thing we could do. It will help us to live long, add up to 20 years to our lives if we just take care of self. So the first and most important thing I think for any of us is to always make sure that our cup is full and it's not empty. We're not running on empty trying to care for other people, but we take care of ourselves first, then we care for others. And so that's been the way that I live my life, and that keeps me grounded. The praying, the self-care, exercising, and the making sure that I'm mentally sound first.
I love that. What is it? That's the last thing the flight attendants say before you take off. Put your mask on first. Or assist someone else. And too often in this season, particularly Black women in leadership, we've been known to wear a cape and be a superhero to everyone but ourselves. And one of my love languages is memes. And I saw a meme that said, I'm turning my cape into a weighted blanket. And I said, yep, and amen. Because that is a game changer. Nah. One of the mantras that I've taken up in this season is, what is mine to do? Particularly in these months, what is mine to do?
Right.
I'm not called to do a lot of things with the stuff I have to do. I'm going to do it. So you mentioned your superpower, Shantel. I'm wondering, Danielle, have you identified what your superpower is?
My superpower I think, has always been the power of resiliency amongst adversity. And that's something that I think all of us have in us. And just from the time, and I think a lot of us are born with it, because, I come from the inner city. Chicago was rough. And so I've been able to build this foundation of experiences, and that all have been bad, but you grow through adversity. So I tell people, I gave a speech, and I love Wonder Woman back in the day. And I told my friend, I wish I had those gold, cups she had on. Yes, she bought me some, and I went on stage. She had the cape on. I wasn't daring, but anyway, I was telling the veterans that, we all have this superpower in us. And so that's what I'm, resiliency, like you said, Dr. Thomas, self-care. I mean, I do have this 10-year-old, but if I can't take care of my mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, and financial health, then what good am I to this 10-year-old boy who's relying on me? Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that. My late mother used to always impress on me the importance of the 3 F's. And you all both mentioned them in one way or another. There's family. Because you must have something to ground you before this world will ground.
Right.
Family and family, who are the friends who become like family. Because as we are often reminded, while we can't pick our family, thank God we can pick our friends.
Amen.
And so those 3 are actually what have kept me grounded in these last 18 months and in all of my life. Because that helps to remind me of what self-care actually looks like, what resilience looks like, and also how can I show up for others by showing up for myself first.
Exactly. And fun. We forgot another F. Fun.
And fun. And I think too often, particularly as Black women in high-powered positions, we forget to have fun. Is something, I dare say, spiritual and holy about fun. Whether it's the giggle fest over the phone, or again, my love language is memes and reels. So I will send you a meme, often if we're in the same room, and then look over at you to see if you're giggling. Like, you read it. Now try not to break it. Now try not to crack laughing while pastor is still preaching. Come on, I dare you. I dare you. I love that for us. You all have both kind of mentioned in passing, your roles in leadership, where you are professionally. But I'm wondering if you can recall what would be your first experiences with leadership. Additionally, who have been or who are examples for you of Black women leaders that you watched and that you modeled your leadership after?
Okay, so I'll start. So I think from an early age, I was put in leadership roles, and that was I started running track when I was in the 6th grade. And so I was at the field day, and we had the field days where the girls and the boys run. And so I beat all the girls, and I could turn around and look back and watch the next girl come over the line. So then they had me run against the boys. But then I beat all the boys. What I didn't know, I'm from Indianapolis, and Wilma Rudolph was there at the time.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so she came, drove me home to my house, knocked on the door, and told my mom, this little girl, is going somewhere. Right. So I've traveled the world running track, but I never made it to the Olympics. But at one time, I was on a team that held the indoor 4x4 world record for a few weeks in London. And I was once ranked like 23rd in the US. So those were some great things, but it all started in 6th grade. So what happened is when I went back to school the next day, the kids were like, oh my goodness, Wilma Rudolph was here and you were so great. And all the girls at that time, I didn't have a lot of friends. I was very quiet and introverted. But then I had all these friends the next day, right? And they were like, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? So at that point, I realized I have all these friends, and I became like this instantaneous leader. I had to talk more, had to engage more with them. I was invited to their homes, and they were all looking to me for information or what to do and how to do it. And it was overwhelming, but it became fun, and it helped me to come out of my shell. So I would say 6th grade, 7th grade, I became this little leader. But then I think when I got to high school, I began to cultivate that, and I understand how to be quiet when I needed to be quiet, when people needed to talk, to when to open my mouth and speak. Because when the girls in high school would say, don't tell the secret, I did not. I think that's why I went into psychology, But when they said, can you help me with this boyfriend or this friend or situation? And I was always an athlete, and I did all the sports. And so I was always a captain. So I think that started from 6th grade. But by the time I got to high school, I understood as a leader, there are times where you follow as well as you lead. There's a time where you speak and you don't speak. And there's a time when you can step back and let somebody else lead, and it doesn't diminish you at all. So I've learned to really use the lead as I climb. As I lead and I climb, I'm going to pull somebody else up and have them come along with me. So that's been one of the models in my life to this day. But it started I think in 6th grade. And my people, this is going to sound very cliche, but my mother is my biggest cheerleader and has always told me, Shannon, you can do anything you put your mind to. And so I have to say, my mother has been one of the women who I watched her as a single mom, raise 2 children, go to night school. I mean, graduate, from high school, go to night college, get her, her degree, become a fashion designer, just overcome all the odds, right? And then Wilma Rudolph, of course, because she was very influential in my 6th through 8th grade years. And then there was another woman, Joanne Grissom, who she gave me over to, who trained me, and I traveled with her and that team. And then I will say Maya Angelou. I mean, just I Know Why the Cage Birds Sing and all of her poetry, it really got me through some difficult times, in my life. And so those are the women that I looked at and I patterned myself after, and I thought, man, I would love to be like them. And then I have Angela Bassett and Michelle Obama, of course. Those are 2 others that are if I say who is in my package of things that I read and I have been encouraged by Davis, they all have been very impactful in what I have read or what I have seen. And I've said, these are women I want to be like and who have done well in life.
Love
Yeah,
that.
me too.
What about you, Danielle?
So I would say around middle school as well, I remember my mom had transferred me from one school to another, and I didn't know anyone around that time, about 6th grade, and found out about basketball. And basketball, I could try out for the middle school basketball team, and worked hard and made that team. And it's just amazing when you're part of a team, an athletic team, how people, other students, other teachers, they just look at you differently. You have to hold yourself to a certain standard. You have to maintain excellent grades. And so I just started to thrive. And I was an introvert too. I had low self-esteem, the dark, skinny girl, so I had all those complexes, all that stuff. But athletics slowly started to peel that onion down where I felt secure in my own skin. And so anyway, being on the middle school basketball team, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, becoming one of the leaders, a captain eventually by 8th grade. And then that catapulted me to becoming student council president. That was a wonderful experience. Had a vice president, just learning about how government runs in the 8th grade. And I worked at a candy store, the neighborhood candy store. I started working there when I was 11. And so I knew everybody at the school. Everybody knew me. And, I would actually say, let me back that up a little bit. I would say, besides maybe seventh grade or maybe eighth grade, I actually used to open up the candy store and I would run it prior to school starting. And so that was my first, I think, leadership, business experience. And then from there, I just kind of and that grounded me. Because I always knew I wanted to attend the University of Notre Dame. So I always knew I had to be this clean cut kid. And so then I went off to high school and I just blossomed. I mean, I remember observing an upperclassman, and he had 7 rows. This is Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps program I was in. And he had like several rows of ribbons and all these medals, and he was handsome. And all I kept thinking was, I was a freshman, when I'm a senior, I want to be the top dog. And so by the time I was a senior, I became the first girl or female to be lieutenant colonel at my high school. Yeah, so it was a cool experience to, lead over 300 other kids, and they looked up to me, they cherished me, and it was just an amazing feeling. But of course, went to college and then I was knocked back down to reality. It hit me hard when I went off to college, but those are some early experiences that I'm still fond of today, and they just bring me great joy just to think about it. I would say growing up, I always looked up to my grandmother. She was very resourceful because we grew up off her food stamps and we didn't have much. So she was resourceful. She found a way to provide for her grown kids and 3 grandkids. I never knew how she did it, but she did it. We always had meals. Just her strength, her stature. She was about 4'10", 4'11", but her stature, the people in the community, she was a community lady. She babysat. She did, she took care of the apartment building for the landlord. And so just seeing her work, her mental fortitude, I said, I have to make it to provide for her one day when she needs me, because she's keeping the family afloat. And then school teachers, Miss Cato, one of my very good buddies, I met her when I was 11 years old. She's a school teacher, special education. Always looked at her as the ultimate professional, and she took me under her wing. And now she's 75, 76 years old, and we still keep in touch. And so I'll never forget her. And I would say career-wise, when I got out of college, I was lost, didn't know what direction I wanted to head into. So I applied to be a school teacher. And so Miss McDaniel, she was the principal at a charter school in Chicago, and I had no experience, but, that's when that athletic background comes into play. I mean, people just knowing that you're a team. You may not have the skills that we need right now, but you're part of a team. You know how to be a team player, a time management skills. You can learn. I mean, you're in college, so you went to college, you're college educated. She taught me, how to be a professional. And then I just observed her from a distance on how she managed a school full of women, African-American women. She never sided with anyone. She was always pretty neutral. And in a couple of weeks, I'll be heading back to Chicago to celebrate her 70th birthday. And so just to have these long-lasting relationships, and there's more, but we could be here for the next several hours. I want to make it very short, but like Dr. Thomas said, reading the works of Dr. Maya Angelou, I'm going to put Oprah out there, self-made. I look at myself as a self-made woman. Nobody gave me anything. I had to do it on my own. I wish I had a little bit of Oprah's money now. I'm not going to lie. No, that's keeping it real. But Oprah, just looking at her from a distance, professional athletes like Cheryl Swoops back in the day, what she did, Lisa Leslie, just looking at those women, just to, just keep going and looking at what they've done after their athletic careers.
Now, you did mention something about not being self-made but also I do think that there's a uniqueness that's particular to Black women leaders in that we often model the alternative to the self-made. We think about what does it mean to do something in community versus the sort of rugged individualism or toxic professionalism, perfection that shows up in our culture, often in men, sometimes in other women. But I wonder if you all have noticed, while we have kind of pulled ourselves up in community, is there some self-compassionate awareness, community building, and strength vulnerability that has shown you a path to leadership through relationships and collaboration?
Ooh, that's loaded.
I know, right? Like,
We're just going to find the cure for the common cold, develop the perfect pair of hosiery, and collaborative leadership.
okay, so say it again, like in a shorter, just the collaborative leadership, like how do
Thinking
we?
about the model of many of the women that you've stated that you admired, that you look up to you, that you celebrated, while it may have felt like they were self-made, they did it in community. Point earlier and tell you that you, as you lead and climb and brings to you. That is, in the research that I've done, that's a peculiarity in leadership. So how has that kind of shown up for work? Whether it's self-compassionate awareness, community building, or strength through vulnerability?
Ooh, I think for me, it's all of the above because and having my private practices, when I initially started the private practices, it was just me. And I didn't know anything about leading or, in that area because we're taught to be mental health professionals, but we're not taught anything about business in those, just taught how to counsel. And so when I had people start calling me and say, hey, I heard you were a great supervisor. But, after I was their supervisor, they were like, I hear you do great supervision, but can I stay on in the practice? And I'm like, okay, but I'm going to let you know right now, this is all new to me. So we'll be learning as we go. And so for me, I think I was being vulnerable and open and telling them up front, hey, I know how to do therapy, but I'm not a business owner. I know nothing about this business and how to grow and run a business. But what I found is because I was vulnerable and open and talked what I did know and what I did not know. And I was open to tell them, I would ask them, how long do you want to stay in my practice before you leave? And some of them would say 3 years or a year, but ultimately most of them stayed with me about 15 or 20 years before they left. And a couple of them I had to push out and say, you're ready to go. You can do this. So I felt like I did, part of me was that, it's a community. Like I have a culture in my practice. It's primarily African-American women and men who were in the practice. And we service primarily African-American or people of color. I should say not just African-American, but the majority are people of color. And so I would say to them, hey, you said you want to be here 3 years, but I'm trying to figure out why you're staying. They were like, because you're such a good teacher. You're fair. I like it here. I don't need to go out and start my own because I'm getting, my portion that I received is I can live on. And so I started to say, I want to equip them because we need to continue to branch and grow. So the community grows. So you can start a practice. I have a practice. And we're not competing with each other. We're support. And so some of those people have now left and started their own practices and they've grown. And so I feel, if you think about community, I can only service so many in my community. And there's enough work for all of us to live well, be well, and to help others. So my goal is never about the money, but to make sure that the people that I help are well. And there are some therapists who I pulled them aside and said, I want to clone you as a mini me, and then you go out and do the same thing because I can see your skill set. You're a go-getter. You're passionate about this work. And let me show you how I do it. So here's the roadmap. Look at it and then go. And so that's how I feel like as I climb, I lead, or I lead as I climb. So I identify usually 2 or 3 people in my practice who I can see that these people are passionate and will do the work and can start their own successful practice. And then I train them. And then I'll say, what's the track? Is it 3 years? Is it 5 years? Is it 7 before you leave? And like I said, some of them stay 10, 15 years. I had one 21 years and I have another who's been there 25. As long as I've been in practice, almost, she's still here. I'm not going anywhere. I'm 70 years old and I'm just having fun. So I think it's very important that, as leaders, when we see people are ready to leave and go, we don't say, no, I have to hold on to them and keep them in my, with me, or this is my community and I've established it and this is it. And no one else can come or leave. It has to be, it's relational more than transactional. I think that we have to be open to saying, okay, it's time for you to go. Baby bird, let me push you out the nest. And, and you go fly and soar and I'm going to soar and then we stay connected. Yeah. So for me, I think it's all 3.
I love that.
I would say the same thing as a speaker with Wounded Warrior Project. I never really looked at myself as a leader. I just look at myself as a team player, but I'm on this podcast and I'm sharing some lessons. But, when I think about it, I guess I am a leader in the veterans community. I'm putting myself out there every time I go speak, whether it's a veterans audience or a civilian audience. I mean, I am opening myself up, creating that awareness through just sharing my own personal story and my journey and the challenges of being a female combat wounded veteran. But I think there's strength in that because, like I said earlier, there's so many veterans out there that are hopeless, that are helpless, that are suicidal. That they don't come to the forefront because of the stigmatization of mental health. Being something that's bad. To me, it's normal. I mean, I talk about all the time about the inhumanities of war. So of course, when you come back, you might not quite be the same. So that's where I can come in, as a female, whereas my male counterpart, he may not. He's hardcore. He's doing his thing. But as a woman, I can say it's okay to let down your guards and just open up and share. And so that's what I do every time I speak. I'm putting myself out there, to show that I'm human and we can grow and learn from our experiences and move forward. And, putting myself out there allows me to bridge that gap between the military community or veterans community and the civilian communities and figure out ways that we can help each other. Because I tell people, Wounded Warrior Project is a non-for-profit organization. We don't receive government funding. So we rely on the public, our fundraising efforts, direct moral efforts. We rely on the community to help those most vulnerable get back on their feet and continue to serve their community. So I feel like my role is just, uplifting and being a cheerleader. And it's okay to feel the way you feel, but there's also help out here too. Dr. Thomas, you're out there. I mean, I know you work with kids, but maybe one day you might branch out. But I'm going to tell you, we're a hardcore population. It's like building communities that understand and support veterans also creates, opportunities for systematic change. The Veterans Administration has changed so much in 21 years. I remember when I used to go to the clinic, and I would go to the clinic and it would be all these Vietnam veterans like salivating over me. And I'm like, oh my God. But, nowadays I can go to the VA and it's a women's clinic, where the receptionists are women and the doctors are women, and I'm in there. And we have to be, in my situation, at first when I got hurt, I wanted to be invisible. I didn't want to be seen because to me, it was shame. It was shame and, losing my arm and being a female and having those scars. But I said, I lost my arm serving my country. So why am I hiding? What am I hiding from? So I am starting to see myself more as a leader for the veterans community because I'm willing to put myself out there. And I love this lead as I climb. I'm still climbing, and I want something out there. In July, I'm going to be climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. So I'm literally going to be climbing. So yes, so lead as I climb. And so my thing is just to bring joy, joy from tragedy. That's why I said my superpower is resiliency and that never give up mentality.
That's good. That's
That
good.
is so rich. As you
I wrote
climb,
that. That's nice.
as you literally climb Kilimanjaro.
Yes.
Woo.
And I have to say, that's not mine. So I can't own that. I received an award from the YWCA here, which is like one of the biggest awards you can get in the city. And that's their motto, like lead as we climb. So they always say we need to, as women, we lead as we climb. I want to say, that's not mine.
I'll look it up and credit it to something. Or I'll add a word or take a word out.
Yes, it's theirs. But yes, and so my passion is I work with women primarily. I started the nonprofit for kids, but my main piece is working with women and couples in therapy. Yeah. So you never know. We may, Danielle.
You never know. You never know, because this is one thing. I don't want to get off topic. I can see how I can get off topic, but when we treat the veteran, we have to remember that the veteran is part of a system. He's got a spouse or a caregiver, he's got kids. And so when we look at them healing, we have to look at them holistically. And that's where community partners come in, because the VA is just for veterans, but you need those community partners to do, what you doing? But no, so that's great. So I hope in the future I can introduce you to some people with Wounded Warrior Project and get you on the bus too.
All right.
Speaking as the proud daughter of a disabled Vietnam veteran who is also a widower for whom I am his primary caregiver because I'm an only child. It's a systematic team effort.
Yes.
It is an all deck on hands, all the supports, all you need, we all need something.
Yes.
And one of the things that I often say when related to mental health, there's no shame if I pull out my inhaler. Nobody judges me or acts some kind of way or if I reach for my inhaler. Why would we then attribute shame to another part of the body that also needs a little bit of help?
Right.
Exactly.
I have no shame when I go to the dentist, except when they ask me if I flossed. And I kind of say, look, this is a thing, but exactly. There's no shame.
Yes.
We're not disparaging you. We're not actually putting you down. Folks aren't self-medicating to deal with dental challenges or asthma. Let's elevate the conversation around mental health.
Amen.
People can get that, particularly in Black and Brown communities, so that people can get the help that they need. I have on my battery pack, my power bank, a sticker that says, I love Jesus and my therapist.
All
And
right.
so really important.
Yes.
It's a both and, not an either or. And
Right.
so we have to kind of really eliminate the stigma.
Yes.
And to your point, Danielle, particularly in the military community,
Mhm.
because if you present, you are trained to be so strong that having any sort of weakness
They're gonna kick you out.
is a challenge.
It's a challenge.
They
They're
will
gonna
kick you out.
Yes. Yes.
So then now we have to, okay, now I'm weak.
Yes. And then that just spirals out of control where now you having these thoughts of, I'm not worthy.
We touched on this a little bit earlier, but I'm wondering, what are some best practices you all have that keep you going as you look to integrate faith, family, and career? I heard Taekwondo, heard mountain climbing.
Yeah. If I start, I think I said it when I talked about my praying and fasting. That's every morning. As research talks about, the first 7 minutes of the day or the last 7 minutes of the day, what you do really matters. So those first 7 minutes, if I wake up and I'm in peace and I'm listening to worship music and I'm praying or I'm meditating, or stretching or exercises, then that's how my day's going to start. But if I start out with, oh my goodness, I overslept, I need to run and get the kids, X, Y, then I'm starting out in a stressful state. The same thing when I go to sleep. If I go to bed with that relaxed state of mind and, making sure things are calm and peaceful, that's going to happen. If I go to sleep and I'm watching these movies that are like horror movies or whatever, then I'm going to have that in my. So I'm really big into making sure that my mental and physical health are well. And so making sure that my day and what keeps me going, my faith, my family, my business, that's in order. So it's always my faith first, and then it goes to my family. But then again, in that faith piece, making sure that I'm taking care of me first. So what I do in the morning, I have to get up, I have to pray, I have to meditate, then I exercise, and then I start my day. And when I don't do that, I feel the difference. I feel the difference, and my day is going to be off. And so I think that for me, there's times where I have to fast. I just turn the plate over because I'm like, I need to hear from God. I need to make sure that I can say that food that I eat is not the true nourishment. My spirit needs to be nourished. And so I think it's just very important. And I know for people, whatever their faith is or their walk is, I'm like, just as long as you do it,
Yes.
And I think also as well as long as we know that we have to do something, we have to move. Just move 20, 30 minutes a day. That body moving. That'll keep you, drink your water, half of your body weight in water is what I was told to drink. So that's what I make sure I do every day. I get at least half of what I weigh, in ounces of water. So those kind of basic things that are simple, we all know to do.
Don't do it.
Those are the things that I think keep me mentally and physically and spiritually well.
All right. For me, I'm going to piggyback off of you. Self-care, like going to the gym almost every day. So YMCA 3 times a day. Then I've always had a treadmill at home since I got out the military, just in case I don't want to be bothered with anybody. Working out, lifting, just paying attention to what's going on upstairs, because, I'm still a woman and I still have a missing limb. And I like to say, yes, I'm perfect, but I'm not. So I have those moments where that self-awareness piece where I feel like, I'm slipping a little bit. So I don't see a therapist anymore. I've hired a trainer. So I'd rather just throw up some weights, put on my activity arm with my hook and just throw up some weights. And if I feel like talking to her, I talk to her. If I don't, but that's my time. So just really finding that private time with myself just to make sure I'm okay, because I am on the road and I'm constantly, sharing what happened to me in Iraq. So you're almost like reawakening stuff that you're maybe trying to close, but never really close. And so just checking in physically, emotionally, spiritually. Like I said, exercise, hobbies. My son and I, we learned we're playing pickleball together. He's in Taekwondo. So a lot of I have my 9 to 5, which isn't really 9 to 5, but I also have my second job, which he's probably my first job, but just taking him. I mean, Dr. Thomas, you had 2 boys, so just taking them to basketball tournaments and this and that, I find great joy. I'm the chauffeur mom. So that gives me great joy, because for a long time, I didn't think I was going to be able to have a kid. So just to have this little boy that challenges me every freaking day. I wrote that down. First 7 minutes, last 7 minutes. So I actually started implementing this, making sure that I'm stretching because, you get older, a creak there and a creak there. But, learning how to celebrate little wins, like I was so nervous about coming on this broadcast, but I'm like, you know what? Once I get through it and complete it, it's going to be great. So I'm going to celebrate. I'm going to take myself out to lunch. So I believe in, rewarding myself, just like Dr. Thomas said, using faith as a grinding principle. When I was hurt in Iraq, I was like, who can I dial up, in my time of need? And I called on the Lord, because I didn't know who else. I was up there by myself. And so that's my guiding principle, is to always believe in something that is higher and more powerful than myself. And I'm instilling that stuff, still instilling those values into my son as well. And then I have a career with purpose. I used to work for the Chicago Board of Education, very political system, the Department of Veterans Affairs, which also gave me great purpose. I was a readjustment counselor helping veterans with benefits and stuff. But with Wounded Warrior Project, I just get to touch so many souls. But with that, it becomes a great responsibility. And so that's why we bring it back into, self-care and setting those boundaries. I'm really very clear on boundaries with my team. I work here and then I have family time. You cannot interrupt, my family time. So
Absolutely. I love the first 7 minutes and last 7 minutes. And I've been doing that subconsciously and then not even realizing that's what I've been doing. Lately taken to incorporating breath prayers, just sweet little quick, or even prayer beads. And just kind of every time I hear the prayer bead click, then I actually will say a prayer, and I put it on my left hand because I'm a lefty. So my hand is always moving. And one of my newest breath prayers that I say as soon as I wake up, before I even push open the app to start the coffee maker, God, get in my head before I do. Because otherwise it's a whole thing.
I like that. I'm going to have to use that one. I'm going to take that one.
The other thing that I've found is I have now taken to, after I brush my teeth, I look in the mirror, and I found this online somewhere. I say, I love you 3 times, and then follow that with, God, I can't wait to see what miracles you have in store for me today.
Okay. I like that too.
Because that puts me in a posture of being open to whatever miracle shows up. Sometimes the miracle is I remember to put the coffee grounds into the coffee maker. That's the miracle in the morning, because there are some days where I have brewed a pot of hot water, and so that's the miracle. And then at the end of the day, I've taken to listening to the Calm app and falling asleep, because I would listen to jazz or I'd fall asleep watching whatever you put in those last 7 minutes are what you're going to kind of be ruminating on. So now I'm listening to some sleep sounds from the Calm app, which are just really settling my system. And I've learned similarly that I can tell the next morning when I didn't listen to it. Because I wake up all discombobulated, like, why did I not rest last? But you didn't put on the Calm app. Those are a couple of mine as well.
Nice.
So this has been such a fruitful, amazing conversation. There are about 2 or 3 more questions I want to ask because I know we all have lives and laundry and responsibilities and all the things. Our new president of the University of Notre Dame, Father Bob Dowd, has charged all of us to ask one another, what do we owe each other? How does your work help create a sense of belonging and, in the words of Dr. King, a more beloved community?
So I'm going to say for me, the belonging and the community, they're just naturally built into who I am as far as how I engage every day with the people, whether live in my home or they're the people that are in my practice or the young people in the community or
Yeah.
the women that when I do speak at women empowerment events. And I think, just being able to say that I feel that I belong, I sense a belonging to them and they belong. So we are connected through the relationships that develop and grow. I wrote a book during COVID called Life is Grand After That Man when I went through my divorce and then just stories of different women that I have worked with who have gone through their divorce and the healing. And they were like, Dr. Thomas, you need to write this book. And so as they told their stories and I said, change names and dates and, make it really fun and light. But can I shift because this is our community, right? As women, the women that go through that's a community,
Yes, it
right?
is. Yeah.
Because we have to learn how to love again, trust again, live again, be okay being alone again, And so all of that was so important to me. And I was like, I have this community of women and sisters now that I didn't have before. And so I think when we think about belonging, in that space, who we are, how we develop and our morals, our values, and when we connect with others, not just women, but anyone, it's so important to say, do they accept me? And can I accept them for who they are? And they accept me for who I am, then yes, then I belong here because this is my community, and we just continue to grow that. I think it's so important for us to open our circles and let our community grow, not to say, hey, this is my community but every time I meet someone, I think, how can I connect with them? What do we share in common? And if it's a woman or even a male that I can say, hey, I like how we think and how we get along, and we have some of the same thoughts, beliefs, and I like your character, then I can open my circle to that person. So research says women are supposed to have 3 women that they're totally vulnerable with to be healthy, and men only have 1.
Wow.
But, those 3 close friends, if you don't have them, why? But I think I have about 12 women. I counted one day, how many women am I close to and am I vulnerable with and I'm open with and I share my true inner self? And there's 12. So I'm like, I have more than enough, but I'm willing to open that circle to have a larger community even now and have a more sense of belonging to more people and being a part of that. So that's me.
Sounds good. I'm gonna write that down. I think I have about 3 or more too, so probably not 12. They're probably not 12 because I work remotely, so we're a little isolated. But Dr. Thomas, I think as a former, scholar athlete, you can identify with this. So I think, let me see, 3 years in middle school, let me see, 9. So for 12 years, I identified with being a student athlete. That was my tribe. Middle school, high school, college, and then even a little bit after college. And then one day all that went away and I became a school teacher and I found community there and fellowship and love, but something was missing. And I said, what is missing? And it was just that cohesion is to be a team. And for me, it was to be a part of something that was bigger than myself. And so I joined the military. And a lot of people who don't know me think I just joined the military out the blue. Well, I knew as a 7-year-old that I wanted to serve my country. And I said, at 25, 26 years old, I'm still, I still have it. I'm still athletic. I can still do this. I wanted to study leadership. I said, what better way to study leadership is by joining the military? You got officers and generals and they're leading troops. What better way? And so I served, but then I got hurt. And 23 months later into my service, it was gone. And so now I'm not literally, but I'm out in the street figuratively trying to figure out, this sense of belonging. Now I'm classified as disabled, which I'm still able, but the world looks at me as disabled, pity me. And so I was trying to find that community. And, when I started working for the Department of Veterans Affairs, and I was a readjustment counselor, I found my community. Now the gender was totally different. It was mostly Vietnam veterans, and they looked at me like, hey, we didn't serve with women and we was in the jungle and this and that. But I said, you know what? I am. And I was in the sandbox, which is Iraq, and you guys were in Vietnam, which is the jungle. But our commonality is we served our country. We put our lives on the line. Our lives out there. We sacrifice our minds and our spirits and some of us body parts. So let's work together. And so for me, my belonging, my tribe is the veterans that I encounter. And Dr. Thomas, like you said, I'm even learning to expand that when I go out and talk. I used to just focus on the veterans, but now, if you didn't serve, you're an American patriot because you're here and you're fundraising and you're here to hear what I have to say about my experiences and demystifying mental health, because I have a physical injury, but there's so many people out there that have invisible wounds, post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, military sexual trauma. So how do we bring all of us together to work toward, to steer in the right direction? So I just believe that my contributions to Wounded Warrior Project and my public advocacy, going to DC and advocate for certain bills, and embodies that community-oriented leadership that mirrors Dr. King's vision. And I can challenge, when I go out and speak, I can challenge perceptions about veteran populations, and I can spark dialogues that people had never conceived and uplift others when they're down, all which I think are vital in creating spaces of belonging, empathy, and compassion.
Belonging, empathy, and compassion. If only we had more of that in this world, how much better would we all be? Last big question.
Okay.
We chose Sankofa as the symbol for our series, which is a bird at the center of the graphic that we use for the series. Sankofa comes from the Twi language that roughly translates as, it is not taboo to go back and retrieve what we lost. Does that resonate? How does that resonate with your work, your life, how you show up in the world?
Yeah, you want me to
Go ahead,
go first?
I like.
Okay, so, when I was younger, I don't know if this was like, maybe when I was in my 20s, I saw the movie Sankofa, and it was life-changing. The movie was life-changing for me, and it really connected me to, it made me go back and watch some, Roots again, and then 40 Years Without a Comb. It was just like all these other movies came up after watching Sankofa. And so for me, going back and trying to get what I lost, when I think about what has happened, or what's, again, that whole lead while I climb is where that comes into play in my life, is that when I see young girls, and especially because I'm an African-American female, especially African-American young females who had the self-esteem or the skin cut, the colorism issues, or they were so skinny, those things. When I see them with their heads down or they don't have the confidence, my goal has always been to make sure I can build them up. And it grew from African-American young girls to just any young. So in that, my whole thing is going back and capturing that. I make sure that the young women that come into my practice, when I do a lot of the, pro bono and free work through the nonprofit, with one of us called Lovely Me. It's a self-esteem group for girls. And so in there, it's very important for me to help them. They go back and they research their history, their roots. Where are they from? Where they're culturally from. And some people say, I'm American. Where did your family, did they come from? Ireland, Germany? We didn't start out here, so we all have these roots. Or did they come from Africa, or wherever it may be? And so much so that here in Cincinnati, there used to be a group that just ended called Sankofa. And they would take the young people back to Africa and talk to them about, they would go through the whole past, have that experience, and talk to them about, what it meant to be come from Africa to America. And so I try to continue that on since Sankofa is no longer in existence. And so when I was like, oh my goodness, Sankofa, like, how is this so important? And it's so right now, because now we need to have that sense of community, belonging, and where we're from. I think that when you really know your history and your roots, it helps you to be stronger, stand strong, and be proud. And so in my office, we have cultural symbols. And I say it's so important. I ask everybody, what is your cultural symbol? What does that mean to you? And so for me, you'll look around and you'll see a lot of Afrocentric items, but you also see items from other cultures. But I think people need to have this sense when they come into my practices that everybody's welcome here. And it's all about us being well.
I love that.
Yeah.
I got to
Well
check
said.
out that movie Sankofa, figure out where what streaming service I can find it.
Very good movie.
Okay. For me, it's the same thing, I guess. But, when I was a readjustment counselor with the Department of Veterans Affairs, I worked a lot with Vietnam veterans, and a lot of them were bitter. And Dr. Logan, I don't know your father, how he felt about how he was treated when he came home, but they weren't treated well. And so I would sit there and I would listen to the stories about, I know all of them wasn't spit on, but it's definitely through their sacrifice and their lobbying, it afforded me the opportunity to have the things that the benefits, or I don't want to say entitlements, but benefits that I received today, and others, millions of others through their sacrifices. And, just knowing what they've gone through, their history. When I go out and speak, I just want to make sure I honor them. I honor those veterans who were not seen, who were disrespected, by sharing their stories, by sharing my story. And I think Sankofa, embodies that. How can we move forward if we don't understand our military past or our veteran past? And so it's about retrieving and elevating those lived lives, those lived experiences that may otherwise have been overlooked. When I talk, I like to bring up different lessons based on different things. My advocacy, it can bridge, like I said earlier, bridge that the past with the present and draw upon the strength, the lessons learned in military experiences and challenges and moments of perseverance, and inspire us to understand what veterans from the past and present have endured, and just healing through reflection. I think one of the things I enjoy about Wounded Warrior Project is that they have support groups for us if we choose to participate, just to have that reflection and heal and know that you're not alone. And there's an abundance of help out there because of the sacrifices that our Vietnam veterans and probably other war generations had to endure. And I just try to keep in mind that my voice has power, that I have the power to empower other people to get out there, in particular females of color, to get out there and advocate and say, hey, we matter too. We serve too. Not just this gender or culture, like we matter too. And so that's the biggest thing, is just getting out there and putting a face and a name to it all, to the larger masses.
Our voices matter. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your voices, Danielle and Shantel. It has been an absolute pleasure and a true delight, and I can't wait to see where this triad of good trouble, necessary trouble, what we're going to get into going forward. Thank you all for listening in, and we hope you've enjoyed this conversation as much as we have. Please visit think.nd.edu to learn more about Powerful Conversations and other series that might interest you. Until next time, inspire your mind and spark conversations. Go Irish.
Go Irish.